So, something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is what I'm going to call the art of being by yourself. We live in a new world. This era that we're in now. It's very focused around noise, right? Noise coming from every which direction, whether it's your phone, your TV, your car, drama and gossip from family. It's just very interesting to see how things have evolved. But I believe personally that this noise, and the reason that there's so much noise in this day and age, is because, well, there are many different things. But first and foremost, distraction. Now, I'm not going to look at social media or technology and label it as a distraction or unhealthy or not good for people's lives. I don't believe in that at all. I believe in the exact opposite, actually. I believe that social media is a fantastic tool, especially for connecting with the world. And, if you're looking to grow a business, it's fantastic for that. But a lot of people are actually trying to avoid the internal noise and then tune into the external noise, right? Because there are things that are going on in our internal worlds that are very challenging to deal with. Maybe we don't know how to sit with them. Maybe when we do sit with them, it just gets louder and louder, and it's like really confusing because it's just noise. And a lot of people haven't even been taught yet that they are not their minds. Imagine that. Imagine you go throughout your entire life believing that you are your mind, right? I actually believed that for a long time. I believed that, this noise that was going on in here was me, right? And I didn't know how to kind of, tune it out, I guess the word is. But it wasn't until that I learned that I'm not my mind or the noise of my mind that I was having a really hard time with all that stuff. Now, I think that this is something that I would argue that a lot of people don't really know, because when you think about it, right, there's the mind, and it's really noisy. And it's like, okay, well, if we are not the mind, then what are we? That question is kind of like, it's hard to put into context because it's like, well, it's not really thought about. So it's like, well, we are the mind then, right? That's what we are. We are the mind. And if you were to sit with that, it would actually make a lot of sense because there's noise in here, and then there's the self responding to that noise. So you know, there's just a conversation going back and forth. But what's so interesting is that we are not our minds. And so then, looking at it that way, if we're not our minds, then what are we? Well, we're the awareness behind it, right? Um, Metacognition teaches us that. The capacity to recognize yourself as the awareness behind all of the noise that consists of this. And it's not just this. It's also the heart and the gut, right? Um, it's so interesting. And, I would argue, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about history and everything, but I would argue that in this day and age that we're in, it's so easy to just access distraction and, avoidance and everything, to numb and to tune out and everything. When in reality, I would argue that we're really only living like half a life if we're not sitting with our stuff and sitting with our minds and the noise in our minds and understanding ourselves to the best of our ability, right? You know, um, it's just so interesting when you look at things like meditation, the capacity to sit with oneself and to become familiar with oneself, right? It's like, that's very interesting. That's very, the amount of people that actually don't want to meditate because they're afraid of sitting with whatever noise comes with just sitting with yourself. Like it's like, okay, let's pick up my phone. Let's turn on the TV. Let's watch Netflix. Let's go for a ride in the car and listen to some music, right? There needs to be a balance. I'm not going to sit here and say, starve yourself of all of it. No, like there needs to be a necessary balance in everything, but I would argue that there's not a balance right now. I would argue that there's just consumption and overconsumption. And because of that, numbing, right? People get very far away from themselves. They almost don't even know who they are, or they don't. They don't know who they are at all, and that's a very big issue. But would it be easier to sit with yourself and less uncomfortable knowing that you are not the noise of your mind and instead you are the witnessing presence of it? Would that be easier? I'll tell you right now, like, you know, if somebody were to tell me and I didn't know already that I am not my mind, I would literally be like, oh, well, that's a relief, right? So it's important to have that perspective because I think that it can really change the dynamics of a lot of things for a lot of people. Um, and that's important. That's really important, having that understanding. So, yeah, you are not your mind, right? So, okay, with that change of understanding, ask yourself, what is stopping me from sitting with and by myself to just observe, right? Because it can change everything, right? Like when you finally just allow the thoughts and just sit with the thoughts and just let them be as they are, that's when you start to know what's going on inside. And I'm not going to say that that's when you start to know yourself. You'll understand your feelings and behaviors. No, the self is far deeper than that. The self is it's present underneath all that stuff. All of that stuff is just conditioning based on what you've experienced in your life. None of that stuff is you, you know? Like, I know I made a previous YouTube video talking about, like, behavior, right? Like, behavior can be toxic and bad and unhealthy, but behavior is not who people are. It's just their behavior. And I think that that's so interesting to kind of approach things from that perspective. When you approach things from this perspective and really sit with yourself from an honest standpoint and understand that you are the witnessing presence, right? You are the observer behind your mind. It changes the dynamics of everything. And then you can sit with yourself more easily and be like, "Oh, okay, there's a thought. There's a thought. Interesting. Good approach."